My name is Lacey, and at 68 years old, I never expected betrayal would come from my own flesh and blood. The home I worked my entire life to own became the target of their greed. I thought my daughter, Amanda, and her husband, Jackson, were the family I could trust most in this world. Then I forgot my reading glasses one afternoon, and everything changed. The conversation I overheard shattered my heart but awakened something powerful inside me. Before I tell you how I discovered their scheme, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had someone you trusted break your heart. Trust me, what I did next is something you'll want to hear. Life as a widow isn't something you plan for, but that's been my reality for the past 12 years. My husband Frank passed away after 40 years of marriage, leaving me to navigate this world alone. We had built a good life together. Frank was an accountant, and I taught third grade at Oakwood Elementary for 35 years. We saved, carefully paid off our mortgage before retirement, and thought we had planned well for our golden years. Our colonial-style home on Maple Street isn't fancy by modern standards, but it's mine. Every corner holds memories of the life Frank and I built together. The kitchen where I taught our daughter Amanda to bake her first apple pie. The backyard oak tree where Frank built her a swing. The living room where we celebrated birthdays, holidays, and all of life's precious moments. After Frank died, I couldn't bear to part with our home, even when friends suggested I downsize. Amanda is our only child. We had difficulties conceiving, and after several heartbreaking miscarriages, she was our miracle baby. Perhaps we spoiled her too much, always trying to give her everything we never had growing up. She was a bright, beautiful girl with Frank's analytical mind and my artistic streak. After college, she married Jackson Wright, a charming businessman with ambitious plans. When Amanda first introduced me to Jackson 13 years ago, I thought he was perfect for her. Tall, handsome, confident, with a booming laugh that filled a room. He called me Mom from the very first meeting, brought me flowers on Mother's Day, and seemed genuinely interested in my stories about teaching. Frank was more reserved about him, saying sometimes that Jackson talked too much about money and status. But after Frank passed, Jackson stepped up, helping me with house repairs and financial questions. I was grateful for his support during such a difficult time. Amanda and Jackson have 2 children. My precious grandkids, Zoe and Lucas, now 11 and 9. They live across town in a large new construction home, in one of those modern subdivisions with the neighborhood pool and tennis courts. Jackson's real estate development business was doing well, at least that's what they always told me. Their life looked perfect from the outside. The past few years have been more challenging for me financially than I expected. Frank's pension isn't adjusted enough for inflation, and my teacher's retirement doesn't stretch as far as we had planned. Medical costs not covered by Medicare took a large chunk of our savings when I needed back surgery 2 years ago. I'm not destitute by any means, but I've had to budget carefully and sometimes worry about unexpected expenses. That's when Amanda and Jackson started suggesting I should sell my house and move in with them. At first, it was casual mentions during Sunday dinners. "Mom, that roof is going to need replacing soon," Jackson would say, looking concerned. "That's going to cost at least $15,000. Your utility bills must be outrageous for this old house in winter," Amanda would add. "You shouldn't have to worry about these things at your age." They painted a lovely picture of what life could be like if I lived with them. A private suite in their finished basement meals, together with the grandkids, no more worries about home maintenance or bills. Jackson even mentioned building me a small garden area, since he knew how much I loved my flower beds. About 6 months ago, they intensified their campaign. Amanda started bringing over home-cooked meals 3 times a week, saying she worried about me cooking for just myself. Jackson began stopping by regularly to check on little things around the house, always pointing out problems that would be expensive to fix. They started taking me to medical appointments, grocery shopping, and even invited me on their family vacation to Florida. I was touched by their attentiveness. After years of living alone, it felt wonderful to be cared for again. The idea of being around my grandchildren every day was certainly appealing. Zoe was growing into such a thoughtful young lady, and Lucas reminded me so much of Frank with his quiet intelligence. Still, something held me back from agreeing to their plan. This house wasn't just a building to me, it was the physical embodiment of my life, with Frank filled with treasures no one else would value the same way. The antique writing desk that belonged to Frank's grandmother. The collection of Christmas ornaments we'd gathered during our travels. The marks on the kitchen doorframe tracking Amanda's height from toddler to teenager. But I was beginning to wear down under their persistent concern. Maybe they were right. Maybe it was selfish of me to cling to a house too big for one person when I could be helping my daughter and her family while getting the support I occasionally needed. The night before everything changed, we had a wonderful family dinner at their house. Jackson grilled steaks. Amanda made my favorite chocolate cake, and the grandkids were on their best behavior. After dinner, while the children watched a movie, Jackson brought out a bottle of expensive champagne. "We should celebrate," he said, filling crystal flutes I'd never seen before. "Celebrate what?" I asked, accepting a glass. Amanda and Jackson exchanged smiles. "The future," Amanda said, squeezing my hand. "We've been talking and we think we've found the perfect solution for everyone." Jackson leaned forward earnestly. "Lacey, we want you to know we've been looking into some options that would give you financial security and peace of mind. I have a buddy in real estate who thinks your house could sell for much more than you might expect in today's market. With that money," Amanda continued, "you could have a comfortable nest egg, and we would have you close by where we can take care of you properly." I sipped the champagne, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and unease. "That's very thoughtful. I'll certainly think about it." "Of course, take your time," Jackson said, though something in his tone suggested he hoped I wouldn't take too long. "We just want what's best for you." As I drove home that night, I actually found myself considering their proposal more seriously than ever before. Maybe it was time to let go of the past and embrace a new chapter. Maybe living with Amanda and her family would bring new joy to my life. I fell asleep thinking I might call them in the morning to discuss the details. I had no idea that tomorrow would change everything. The next morning dawned bright and clear. One of those perfect spring days that make you grateful to be alive. I had a standing appointment with my book club at the local library every Thursday at 10, and I was excited to discuss the mystery novel we had all been reading. I dressed carefully in my favorite blue blouse and comfortable slacks, had a light breakfast, and was halfway to the library when I realized I'd forgotten my reading glasses. Without those glasses, I might as well not attend. My distance vision is fine, but I can't make out a word on a page without magnification anymore. The glasses weren't in my purse or the car, which meant I must have left them at Amanda's house during dinner the previous night. I distinctly remembered taking them off while helping her clear the dishes. I checked the time. If I hurried, I could swing by Amanda's house, grab my glasses, and still make it to book club only a few minutes late. I called Amanda from the car using the hands-free system Frank had insisted on installing before he passed, but there was no answer. That wasn't unusual. Amanda often put her phone on silent when she was working from home, which she did 3 days a week for her graphic design job. When I pulled into their driveway, I was surprised to see Jackson's sleek black BMW parked there. He should have been at his office by this hour on a Thursday. Perhaps he'd forgotten something too, or maybe he wasn't feeling well. As I approached the front door, I could hear voices from inside. Not the normal tones of casual conversation, but raised voices with an edge of intensity. I paused, key in hand. Amanda had given me a key years ago for emergencies and babysitting. I didn't want to interrupt if they were having a private discussion, so I hesitated on the porch. That's when I heard my name. "Lacey needs to make a decision soon," Jackson was saying, his voice carrying clearly through the partially open window near the front door. "I've already talked to 3 developers who are interested in that location. She's still attached to the house, Jackson. We can't rush her too much, or she'll get suspicious," Amanda replied. My hand froze on the doorknob. They were talking about me, about my house. Something in their tones made me pause rather than announce my presence. "We don't have time for sentimentality." Jackson's voice had a hardness I'd never heard before. "The Westbrook development deal needs to close in 90 days, and that corner property would complete the package. Do you have any idea how much commission I'd make on that deal?" "But what if she says no?" Amanda sounded worried. Jackson laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "She won't say no. Not when her darling daughter is so concerned about her welfare. Not when her thoughtful son-in-law has already prepared all the paperwork to make it easy for her. The paperwork you showed me. It doesn't seem right. She thinks she's just selling the house and moving in with us. But those documents would put all her assets in our control. My heart began to pound so loudly I was afraid they might hear it. I carefully moved closer to the window, staying out of sight. Don't be naive, Amanda. Jackson's voice was dismissive. Your mother is sitting on a gold mine and living like a pauper. That house and lot are worth $700,000 in today's market, especially with that new shopping complex going in nearby. Once the developer's rezoning goes through, it could be worth twice that. But that's her money, her security. Amanda protested, though her objection sounded weak. And what happens when she needs expensive care? When she falls and breaks a hip? When she can't remember to turn off the stove? We'd end up paying anyway. This way we manage the assets properly. I don't know, Jackson. It feels wrong. What's wrong is letting nearly $1 million sit tied up in an outdated house while we're drowning in debt. Do you want to lose our house? Do you want the kids to have to change schools? Do you want to explain to your friends why we had to file for bankruptcy? There was a pause, and I could imagine Amanda's face, the way her resolve always crumbled when confronted directly. Since childhood, she'd hated conflict more than anything. No, of course not, she finally said. Then stick to the plan. Tomorrow I'll bring over the final paperwork. You'll tell her how worried you are about her living alone. I'll explain how this arrangement protects everyone. She signs, we list the house with my buddy Dave, who'll push through a quick sale and problem solved. What if she changes her mind after she signs? What if she talks to someone? And then I heard the words that froze my blood. Don't worry. Soon your mother's house will be ours. She won't even have money to defend herself with a lawyer. Once she signs those papers, the transfer of assets is legal. By the time she realizes what happened, if she ever does, the house will be sold, and the money will be in accounts she can't access. I must have made some small sound because both of them went quiet. Did you hear something? Amanda asked. My heart racing. I quickly and silently moved back from the window and retreated to my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the door handle. I managed to open it and slip inside without making noise. I started the engine and pulled away as smoothly as possible, turning at the first intersection so they wouldn't see me if they looked outside. 2 blocks away, I pulled over because I couldn't see the road through my tears. My own daughter. My own daughter was plotting with her husband to steal my home, to take everything I had worked for my entire life. Not just to convince me to sell and move in with them, which would have been manipulative enough, but to actually take control of all my assets through fraudulent paperwork. The betrayal cut so deep, I could physically feel it like a knife twisting in my chest. I sobbed until I had no tears left, clutching the steering wheel as if it could somehow anchor me in a world that had suddenly turned upside down. The people I trusted most in the world, the ones I thought loved me, were planning to rob me of everything while pretending to care about my well-being. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, I managed to compose myself enough to drive. I couldn't go to book club now. I couldn't pretend everything was normal when my entire world had just collapsed. I drove home on autopilot, barely registering the familiar streets and buildings that had been the backdrop of my life for decades. As I pulled into my driveway, I looked at my house with new eyes. My safe haven, my memory-filled home, the last connection to the life I'd built with Frank. And now I knew it wasn't just sentimentality that had made me reluctant to leave. Some instinct had been warning me, some protective voice in the back of my mind had been trying to tell me that something wasn't right. I sat in the car staring at my front door and made a silent promise to myself and to Frank's memory. They would not take this from me. I didn't know how yet, but I would find a way to protect what was mine. The shock and grief were still overwhelming, but beneath them I felt something else beginning to stir. Anger. Pure, righteous anger. The inside of my home felt different when I finally managed to go inside. The familiar furnishings and decorations that had always brought me comfort now seemed vulnerable, threatened. I wandered from room to room, touching the things that made this house a home. The quilt my grandmother had made for my wedding. The collection of beach glass Frank and I had gathered over years of coastal vacations. The framed crayon drawing Amanda had made in kindergarten. Amanda, my own child. How could she do this to me? I sank into Frank's old recliner, wishing more than ever that he was here. Frank would know what to do. Frank would protect us. My phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. Amanda's name flashed on the screen. With trembling fingers, I declined the call. I couldn't talk to her now. What would I even say? How could I speak to her without revealing what I knew? And if I confronted her, what then would she deny it? Would Jackson smooth talk his way out of it? Would they accelerate their plans before I could protect myself? The phone rang again, and again. Then text messages started coming in. Mom, are you okay? Please call me. Mom, I'm getting worried. Please answer your phone. Lucas wants to know if you're coming to his soccer game Saturday. That last one nearly broke me again. My grandchildren. How could Amanda use them as pawns in this scheme? Did she think about what would happen to my relationship with Zoe and Lucas if they stole my home and money? Did she care? I turned off my phone. I needed time to think without their interruptions, without the pressure of maintaining a facade. Night fell and I hadn't moved from Frank's chair. I hadn't eaten, hadn't even turned on the lights. The darkness matched my mood as I sat wrestling with the most painful betrayal of my life. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Jackson's cold voice. She won't even have money to defend herself with a lawyer. The casual cruelty of it, the calculated exploitation, and Amanda's weak protests followed by acquiescence. Had she always been this morally pliable? Had I failed as a mother to instill stronger values? Around 3 a.m, exhaustion finally pulled me under into a fitful sleep full of nightmares. I dreamed I was locked out of my own house, pounding on the door while Jackson and Amanda watched from the window, counting money and laughing. I woke at dawn, gritty-eyed and disoriented. For one blessed moment, I didn't remember what had happened. Then the awful truth came crashing back, and the pain felt as fresh as it had the moment I heard their words. But something else had emerged overnight. A clarity, a resolve. I was not going to be a victim. I was not going to let them take what was mine. I was not going to roll over and make it easy for them. I just didn't know where to start. Who could I trust? What should I do first? Should I confront them or pretend I knew nothing? Should I call the police? Was what they were planning even a crime, or just morally reprehensible? I desperately needed advice, but I had no idea who to turn to. Most of my close friends had either passed away or moved to be near their own children. Frank had handled most of our legal and financial matters during our marriage, and after his death I had relied on Jackson. The irony was bitter. The very person plotting against me was the one I had trusted with my financial questions. Around 9 that morning, there was a knock at my door. My heart leapt to my throat. Had they come to pressure me in person when I hadn't answered their calls? Peering through the peephole, I was relieved to see my neighbor Dorothy standing on the porch. Dorothy and I weren't particularly close, but we were friendly, occasionally sharing garden cuttings or borrowing a cup of sugar. She was a few years younger than me. A retired nurse with a no-nonsense attitude I had always appreciated. "Lacey, are you all right?" she asked when I opened the door. "Your lights were off all night and your car's been in the driveway since yesterday morning. It's not like you to miss your Thursday garden club." "Book club," I corrected automatically. "I missed book club yesterday." Dorothy peered at me more closely. "You look terrible. Are you sick? Should I call someone?" The genuine concern in her voice nearly undid me. After the cold calculation I had heard in Jackson's voice, Dorothy's simple human kindness was almost too much to bear. To my horror, I burst into tears right there on my front porch. "Oh my goodness," Dorothy exclaimed, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. "Come sit down. Whatever it is, it can't be that bad." But it was that bad. As Dorothy guided me to the couch and went to make tea in my kitchen, I wondered if I could trust her with even a portion of the truth. I needed to talk to someone before I exploded. But was it safe to confide in a neighbor I only casually knew? When she returned with 2 mugs of tea, Dorothy sat across from me and waited patiently while I collected myself. "I'm sorry for falling apart like that," I said, trying to smile. "It's been a difficult 24 hours. Did something happen? Are you ill? Is it one of your grandchildren?" "No, nothing like that," I assured her quickly. "It's complicated. I overheard something yesterday that has me very upset and confused." Dorothy nodded encouragingly. "Dorothy, do you know much about legal matters? Specifically about elder financial abuse?" The words were hard to say, admitting that's what this was. Her expression sharpened. As a retired nurse, she had probably seen such situations before. "Some," she said carefully. "Why do you ask?" I couldn't tell her everything. Not yet. But I needed a starting point. Hypothetically, I began, if an older person was being pressured to sign over their assets to family members, what should they do? Dorothy set down her mug with deliberate care. Hypothetically, she echoed that person should speak to an elder law attorney immediately. "I wouldn't know how to find one," I admitted. "Actually," Dorothy said, "my nephew Thomas is an attorney who specializes in elder law. He has an office downtown. I could give him a call if this is more than hypothetical." I hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I would appreciate that. But please don't share any details. Just that I need some advice." Dorothy studied me for a long moment, then reached over and patted my hand. "Whatever's happening, Lacey, don't face it alone. Too many seniors get taken advantage of because they're too embarrassed or too trusting to seek help." After Dorothy left promising to call me with appointment information for her nephew, I felt marginally better. At least I had taken one small step toward protecting myself. My phone, which I had turned back on that morning, chimed with more messages from Amanda. She and Jackson were coming over that afternoon to check on me since I wasn't answering calls. They were very concerned. The thought of facing them, of pretending I didn't know what they were plotting, made my stomach churn. But maybe it was better to act normal while I sought legal advice. If they suspected I knew anything, they might accelerate their plans. I forced myself to text back, claiming I had a migraine yesterday and had been sleeping. I said I was feeling better now and would see them when they stopped by. Then I went to shower and dress, trying to prepare myself for the performance of my life. I needed to look into the faces of the people who were planning to steal everything from me, and I needed to smile as if nothing was wrong. As I applied my makeup with shaking hands, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The face looking back at me was pale and strained with dark circles under the eyes. But there was something else there too, a steely determination I hadn't seen in a long time. "You can do this, Lacey," I told my reflection. "For Frank, for yourself. And even for Amanda, who needs to learn there are consequences to betraying the people who love you." Dorothy came through with remarkable efficiency. By noon, I had an appointment with her nephew Thomas Franklin for 3:30 that afternoon. Just enough time to see Amanda and Jackson and still make it downtown to the law office. They arrived around 1, Amanda carrying a container of homemade soup, Jackson with a paper bag from my favorite bakery. The perfect caring daughter and son-in-law concerned about my health. It took every ounce of self-control I possessed to greet them normally. To accept Amanda's hug without stiffening. To look into Jackson's eyes without revealing my disgust. "We were so worried when you didn't answer your phone yesterday," Amanda said, setting up the soup in my kitchen as if she owned the place. Which I realized with a chill she was planning to arrange very soon. "Just a migraine," I said lightly. "You know how they knock me out completely." Jackson was wandering around my living room looking at things with new interest. Was he mentally cataloging what could be sold? What would be valuable to the developers buying my property? "Still," he said, turning to me with what I now recognized as fake concern, "it's scary to think of you here alone when you're not feeling well. What if it had been something more serious?" "I managed just fine," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I've been on my own for 12 years now." "But you don't have to be," Amanda said, placing a bowl of soup in front of me. "That's what family is for, to take care of each other." The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. Take care of each other. Right. Speaking of taking care, Jackson said, sitting down across from me at the kitchen table, I've been doing some research on options that would make your life easier and more secure. Here it comes, I thought. The setup. I have some paperwork in the car that outlines a really smart approach to managing your assets, he continued. Nothing you need to sign today, just some information to review. That sounds interesting. I lied, forcing myself to take a spoonful of soup. But I actually have an appointment this afternoon, so I don't have much time to discuss it now. An appointment? Amanda looked surprised. With who? For a split second, I considered lying. But then I decided a version of the truth might actually be useful. Let them worry a little. A financial advisor, I said casually. Dorothy's nephew. She thought he might have some good ideas for me. Amanda and Jackson exchanged a quick glance that I would have missed if I hadn't been watching for it. Mom, you don't need to waste money on a financial advisor, Jackson said, his voice taking on an edge. That's what I do for a living. I can give you better advice for free. It never hurts to get a second opinion, I replied mildly. Besides, Dorothy already set it up and I don't want to be rude by canceling. What's this advisor's name? Jackson pressed. Thomas something. Franklin, I think. Dorothy says he specializes in helping people my age plan for the future. Another glance between them, this one more concerned. Thomas Franklin Jackson's voice had changed subtly. I think I know of him. He's not really a financial advisor, Lacey. He's an attorney. I widened my eyes in feigned surprise. Oh, well, I'm sure he'll still have useful information. What exactly did Dorothy tell you about him? Amanda asked, her voice unnaturally high. I shrugged. Just that he helps older people with their affairs, planning estates and such. Jackson stood up abruptly. I really think you should cancel that appointment, Lacey. Those types of lawyers charge hundreds of dollars just for a consultation. It's a waste of your limited resources. The fact that he was so transparently trying to prevent me from seeing an attorney only confirmed what I already knew. They were planning something that wouldn't hold up to legal scrutiny. I appreciate your concern, I said, standing as well, but I've made up my mind. Now I need to get ready for my appointment. They left reluctantly, Jackson promising to come back tomorrow with those documents I mentioned. As their car pulled away, I felt a surge of triumph. Round one to me. Thomas Franklin's office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, the kind of place that exuded quiet professionalism. The attorney himself was a surprise, younger than I expected, at perhaps 40, with kind eyes and a reassuring manner. Aunt Dorothy didn't give me many details, he said after we'd exchanged pleasantries, but she indicated you might be concerned about potential financial exploitation. I took a deep breath and told him everything. The overheard conversation, Jackson and Amanda's months-long campaign to get me to sell my house. The mysterious paperwork Jackson was bringing tomorrow. Thomas listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes. When I finished, he leaned forward with a serious expression. Mrs. Harrison, what you're describing is a textbook case of attempted elder financial exploitation. Unfortunately, it's more common than most people realize, especially within families. So they're breaking the law, I asked. Based on what you've overheard, they're certainly planning to. Getting you to sign documents under false pretenses that transfer your assets to them would constitute fraud. The fact that they've specifically discussed preventing you from having resources to seek legal help shows clear intent. What should I do? First, don't sign anything they bring you. Not a single paper, no matter what they claim at Island. I nodded firmly. I won't. Second, we need to gather evidence. Your testimony about what you overheard is important, but if we can document their intentions more concretely, we'll have a stronger case. What kind of evidence? Written communications, recorded conversations, financial records showing their motives. For instance, do you know if they're having financial difficulties that might explain this sudden interest in your assets? I shook my head. They've always seemed to be doing well. Big house, nice cars, expensive vacations. Thomas made a note. I'd like to do some preliminary investigation into their financial situation with your permission. There are legal ways to access certain public records that might tell us more about their true circumstances. Please do whatever you think is necessary. By the end of our 90-minute consultation, we had a plan. I would avoid signing anything while pretending to still be considering their offer. Meanwhile, Thomas would investigate Jackson and Amanda's finances and help me secure my assets against potential exploitation. One last thing Thomas said as I was preparing to leave. In your state, it's legal to record conversations that you're a part of without informing the other parties. If they pressure you or make revealing statements, having a recording could be very helpful. He showed me how to use the voice memo app on my smartphone to discreetly record conversations. As I drove home, I felt better than I had since the shocking discovery. I had a plan, I had professional help, and I was no longer simply reacting in panic and hurt. I was taking control of the situation. The next day, I received a call from Thomas. His preliminary investigation had revealed some disturbing information. Mrs. Harrison, I've found multiple tax liens against your son-in-law's business. He's also facing a lawsuit from former investors alleging misappropriation of funds. And there's a notice of default on their mortgage filed just last month. They're in serious financial trouble. The news wasn't entirely surprising given what I'd overheard, but it was still shocking to hear the extent of their difficulties. There's something else, Thomas continued. I spoke with a colleague who handled a case 3 years ago involving Jackson Wright. Apparently, this isn't the first time he's targeted family assets. His first wife's mother made similar allegations, though they settled out of court. A pattern. Not just a desperate act in financial hardship, but a calculated scheme he'd attempted before. What happens now? I asked. Keep the appointment with them tomorrow. Act interested but non-committal about their proposal. Remember to record the conversation if possible, and leave the rest to me for now. That evening, as I was preparing dinner, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, I found a man I didn't recognize standing on my porch. He was in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and a serious expression. Mrs. Harrison, my name is Robert Caldwell. I used to be Jackson Wright's business partner. I understand he and your daughter might be trying to get control of your assets. I stared at him in surprise. How do you know about that? Your attorney contacted me. I've been waiting for someone to finally investigate Jackson, and I want to help. Over coffee at my kitchen table, Robert Caldwell told me about his history with Jackson. They had started a real estate development company together 7 years ago, but Robert had discovered Jackson was misusing investor funds. When he confronted him, Jackson had forced him out of the business through legal maneuvers that left Robert nearly bankrupt. He's charming and persuasive, but underneath that, he's ruthless, Robert said grimly. And he's been targeting vulnerable property owners for years, especially older women who live alone. Like me, I said quietly. Like you, he agreed. And like his first mother-in-law who lost her savings to him before I even met him. The conversation with Robert confirmed what I had begun to suspect. This wasn't just about my house and money. This was a deliberate predatory pattern, and Jackson had pulled my daughter into his scheme. The next morning, Amanda called, her voice overly bright. Mom, Jackson and I are coming over around 2 today to show you those papers we mentioned. It's really exciting, and I think you're going to love the plan we've put together. I'll be here, I said, matching her false enthusiasm with my own. As I hung up, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The initial shock and heartbreak were still there, but now they were tempered by purpose. They thought I was an easy target, a lonely old woman they could manipulate and discard. They were about to discover how wrong they were. By the time 2 o'clock approached, I had prepared myself as thoroughly as possible. My phone was fully charged, the recording app ready to activate with one discreet tap. Thomas had coached me on what questions to ask that might elicit revealing responses. I had reviewed the financial information he'd uncovered about Jackson and Amanda's mounting debts, their mortgage default, and the investor lawsuit against Jackson. I also placed a discreet call to Dorothy, asking if she could drop by around 3, providing me with an excuse to end the meeting if necessary. She agreed without hesitation, understanding from my tone that it was important. When the doorbell rang at exactly 2, I took a deep breath, activated the recording app, and slipped the phone into my cardigan pocket. Then I went to welcome my daughter and son-in-law into my home, knowing their true intentions for the first time. "Mom, you look great," Amanda said, hugging me as she entered. Her voice was overly cheerful, her movements slightly jerky with nervousness. Jackson followed, carrying a leather portfolio that presumably contained the fraudulent documents. "Beautiful day, isn't it, Lacey?" "I brought those papers I mentioned." I ushered them into the living room where I had set out coffee and the cookies Amanda had always loved as a child. A calculated touch of normalcy to put them at ease. So I said, "Once we were seated, you mentioned you had some ideas about my future living arrangements." Jackson exchanged a quick glance with Amanda before opening his portfolio. "We've put together what I think is an ideal solution for everyone. As we've discussed, maintaining this large house is becoming impractical for you, both financially and physically." I nodded, encouraging him to continue. "We've created a comprehensive plan," he said, pulling out several official-looking documents. "Essentially, you would transfer the house and your major assets into a family trust. Amanda and I would serve as trustees, managing everything for your benefit. You'd move into our finished basement suite, all your expenses would be covered, and you'd have the security of family care as you age." "It sounds very thorough," I said neutrally. "May I see the documents?" He handed them over with a confident smile. "Take your time. I've tried to make everything clear, but if you have questions, just ask." I began slowly reviewing the papers, which were dense with legal terminology. Even with my limited knowledge, I could see they went far beyond what Jackson had just described. There were provisions for liquidating assets, language about sole discretion of the trustees, and no protections for me if they decided to change the arrangement. "This seems very complex," I said, looking up at them. "What exactly would happen to the proceeds if my house was sold?" "They'd go into the trust," Jackson said smoothly, "to be managed for your care and benefit. But who would control those funds day to day?" "Well, Amanda and I would as trustees, but it would all be for your benefit, of course." "Of course," I echoed. "And if I needed money from the trust for something, how would that work?" A flicker of annoyance crossed Jackson's face. "You wouldn't need to worry about that. We'd cover all your expenses." But hypothetically, I pressed, if I wanted to, say, take a vacation or make a large purchase, would I have direct access to my money? Amanda jumped in. "Mom, the whole point is for you not to have to worry about managing money anymore. We'd take care of everything." I nodded thoughtfully. "And what if I decided later that this arrangement wasn't working for me? What if I wanted to move out and use my money to live independently again?" Jackson's smile became strained. "The trust would be irrevocable, Lacey. That's for your protection, to ensure the assets are properly managed for your lifetime care." "Irrevocable," I repeated. "So once I sign these, I can't change my mind." "It's really the best approach," Jackson insisted. "Otherwise, you might be vulnerable to influence from others who don't have your best interests at heart." The irony of his statement was almost laughable. "What about my personal belongings?" I asked, turning a page in the document. "It says here, all assets transferred to the trust. Does that include my furniture, jewelry, Frank's collectibles?" "Well, yes, technically," Jackson admitted. "But you'd still use them, of course. It's just a legal formality." I looked directly at Amanda, who was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. "Sweetheart, have you read these documents carefully? Do you understand what they would mean for me?" She fidgeted with her coffee cup. Jackson explained the general idea. "It's to protect you, Mom." "But these documents don't seem to protect me at all," I said gently. "They seem to give away everything I own with no guarantee I'd have any say in how my own assets are used." Jackson's demeanor shifted subtly. The charming facade began to crack. "Lacey, I've spent considerable time creating this plan. It's really the most sensible approach given your situation." "My situation?" "Your age, your limited income, the declining value of this outdated house," he said, a hint of condescension creeping into his tone. "Actually, I countered Thomas Franklin. Mentioned that properties in this neighborhood have increased significantly in value, especially with the new shopping complex being developed nearby." At the mention of Thomas, both Amanda and Jackson stiffened visibly. What exactly did this attorney tell you? Jackson asked sharply. I smiled. He had some interesting insights about property values, trusts, and elder financial protection laws. Did you know that in our state there are enhanced penalties for financial exploitation of seniors by family members? The color drained from Jackson's face. Amanda looked confused, glancing between us. Mom, what are you saying? I set the documents down and looked directly at my daughter. Amanda, I know about the plan to take my house and money. I overheard you and Jackson discussing it the day I came back for my reading glasses. Amanda gasped. What? No, that's not. We weren't. Don't lie to me, I said, my voice firm but sad. I heard everything. How Jackson wants my property for some development deal. How you're in financial trouble. How once I signed the papers, I wouldn't have money for a lawyer. Jackson's expression transformed completely, the mask of caring son-in-law discarded. You were spying on us, he demanded, voice cold. I came to get my glasses, and heard you through the open window, I replied calmly. Imagine my shock at learning my own daughter and her husband were plotting to steal everything from me. Amanda began to cry. Mom, it's not what you think. We're in trouble. The business is failing, we're behind on the mortgage, and Jackson said this was the only way. Jackson turned on her furiously. Shut up, Amanda, don't say another word. But Amanda once started, couldn't seem to stop. He said we'd take care of you, that you'd never know the difference, that it was better than losing everything ourselves. I didn't want to do it, but he said we had no choice. There's always a choice, I told her quietly. You chose your husband's scheme over your mother's well-being. Jackson stood suddenly, gathering the documents with jerky movements. This is ridiculous. We were trying to help you, and you twisted into something ugly. You're probably getting confused in your old age, imagining conversations that never happened. I'm not confused, Jackson. And I have evidence of what you were planning. Evidence. What evidence? His voice had risen, eyes darting around as if looking for something I might have hidden. Enough to take to the authorities if necessary, I said, standing my ground. Enough to protect myself from you. His face contorted with anger. You ungrateful old woman. Do you have any idea what we've done for you over the years? The time we've wasted checking on you, listening to your boring stories, pretending to care. Jackson Amanda cried horrified. But he was beyond caution now, his true nature fully revealed. You think you're so clever getting some two-bit lawyer involved. Let me tell you something. By the time I'm done, you'll be lucky if you don't end up in the cheapest nursing home I can find. I'll make sure the kids never visit. I'll make sure everyone thinks you're senile and spiteful. I remained calm in the face of his vitriol, even as tears streamed down Amanda's face. I think you should leave now, I said quietly. And I suggest you reconsider those threats. They'll sound very interesting in court. Jackson grabbed Amanda's arm. Let's go. She's made her choice. As they reached the door, I called out Amanda. She turned, face streaked with tears, looking more like the little girl I had raised than the adult who had betrayed me. When you're ready to talk without him, call me, I said. You're still my daughter. Jackson practically dragged her out the door. As it slammed behind them, I sank onto the couch, trembling with the aftermath of adrenaline. I pulled out my phone and stopped the recording, staring at the screen for a long moment. Then I called Thomas Franklin. It's done, I told him when he answered. And I got everything on tape. The next week passed in a blur of legal meetings and emotional reckonings. Thomas moved quickly to protect my assets based on the evidence we now had. He filed for a temporary restraining order to prevent Jackson from approaching me or my property, citing the threats captured in the recording. He also placed a legal hold on my house and accounts to prevent any transactions without court approval, just in case Jackson had already set something in motion. What about Amanda? I asked during one of our meetings. She was part of the scheme, but she's still my daughter. Thomas's expression was sympathetic but firm. The recording makes it clear she was a reluctant participant, but she was still participating. For now, we need to maintain legal boundaries with her as well, at least until we see how this plays out. One of the most difficult tasks was explaining the situation to the rest of the family. I had never been close to my sister-in-law Barbara, who lived across the country, but her daughter Catherine had always been fond of me. With Thomas's guidance, I decided to invite Catherine and her husband for dinner to explain what had happened. Their shock and outrage on my behalf was validating. Catherine, who had always had a slightly competitive relationship with Amanda, was especially horrified. "How could she do this to you, Aunt Lacey? After everything you and Uncle Frank did for her?" Catherine shook her head in disbelief. "Jackson has always been controlling her husband," Mike added. "We've seen how he isolates Amanda from family who don't agree with him." Catherine leaned forward earnestly. "What can we do to help? Do you need a place to stay, money for legal fees?" Their support brought tears to my eyes. "Just knowing I'm not alone means more than you can imagine." As promised, Thomas investigated Jackson's finances thoroughly, and what he uncovered was shocking. Not only was Jackson's business on the verge of bankruptcy, but he had taken out multiple high-interest loans using fraudulent collateral. Most disturbingly, we discovered he had somehow managed to obtain a second mortgage on my house through a predatory lender forging my signature on the documents. "This is beyond civil fraud," Thomas told me grimly. "This is criminal activity. We need to contact the district attorney." The case began to build momentum. Two former clients of Jackson's came forward with similar stories of deception and financial manipulation. Robert Caldwell provided crucial documentation of Jackson's previous business misconduct. Most damning of all, Jackson's first ex-wife contacted Thomas after hearing about our case through mutual acquaintances, confirming that Jackson had indeed financially exploited her mother in a nearly identical scheme. Throughout this process, I didn't hear directly from Amanda. Through Catherine, I learned that she and Jackson were separating, that she had taken the children and moved in with a college friend temporarily. I wanted to reach out to offer her a chance at redemption despite her betrayal, but Thomas advised caution. "Let's wait until we're certain she's truly separated from his influence," he counseled. "If she's serious about making amends, she'll contact you when she's ready." With Thomas's help, I made several proactive financial moves to secure my future. We established an irrevocable trust, with legitimate protections for my benefit, naming Thomas and Dorothy's other nephew, an accountant, as independent trustees. We worked with a real estate attorney to invalidate the fraudulent second mortgage and place additional legal protections on my property deed. I also updated my will. Though it broke my heart, I could no longer leave everything to Amanda as I had planned. Instead, I established education trusts for Zoe and Lucas that Amanda could not access and directed the remainder of my estate to be divided among several charities that Frank and I had always supported, with a small portion for Catherine. About 3 weeks after the confrontation, I encountered Jackson unexpectedly at the grocery store. He was in the produce section when I rounded the corner with my cart. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then his face twisted into an ugly sneer. "Enjoying your victory, Lacey?" he asked loud enough for nearby shoppers to hear. "Feel good about destroying your daughter's marriage and taking away her children's security?" I felt people watching, probably assuming this was just a family squabble. But I refused to be intimidated or shamed. "I didn't destroy anything, Jackson," I replied calmly. "You did that when you tried to steal from me and then threatened me in my own home. How are those fraud investigations going, by the way?" His face flushed dark red. "You'll regret this. No one crosses me without consequences." "Are you threatening me again?" I asked, pointedly glancing around at the witnesses. "That didn't work out so well for you last time." A store employee approached, clearly concerned by the escalating tension. "Is everything okay here, ma'am?" "It's fine," I assured him. "This man was just leaving." Jackson glared at me, then abandoned his shopping cart and stormed out of the store. The confrontation, though unpleasant, was oddly empowering. I had stood my ground. I had called out his behavior publicly, and I had refused to be silenced by shame or fear. Word of what had happened spread quickly through our community. To my surprise, several other older women from church and my volunteer groups confided similar experiences with their own children or in-laws. One had signed over her house and now regretted it. Another was being pressured to invest in a grandchild's dubious business venture. My willingness to take legal action and speak openly about financial exploitation seemed to open a floodgate of similar stories. Dorothy suggested I speak to her senior advocacy group about my experience, and though I was initially reluctant, I eventually agreed. Standing before a room of 30 seniors and social workers sharing my story of betrayal and empowerment was both terrifying and liberating. The hardest part wasn't discovering the betrayal I told them. It was acknowledging that the people I loved most were capable of such deception. But once I faced that truth, I found strength I didn't know I had. As the criminal investigation into Jackson's activities progressed, Amanda finally reached out. She left a voicemail that I listened to, repeatedly trying to gauge her sincerity. "Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. What we did, what I allowed to happen, it's unforgivable. But I want you to know I've filed for divorce. I'm getting counseling. I'm trying to understand how I became someone who would hurt the person who has always loved me most. If you're ever willing to talk, I'd like to try to explain. Not to excuse, just to explain." I consulted with Thomas, who advised me to proceed cautiously, but acknowledged that rebuilding some relationship with Amanda might be possible, especially for the sake of my grandchildren. Our first meeting was at a neutral location, a coffee shop Thomas recommended near his office. Amanda looked thinner with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. When she saw me, she burst into tears. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry." I didn't rush to comfort her as I once would have. Instead, I waited until she collected herself. "I need to understand how this happened, Amanda," I said quietly. "How my own daughter could plan to take everything from me." She couldn't meet my eyes. It started small. Jackson said we were having temporary financial difficulties, that we just needed a loan. Then it became selling your house to invest in a sure thing that would benefit everyone. Then it was about protecting you from other people who might take advantage of you. And you believed him? I wanted to, she admitted, because the alternative was admitting I'd married a con man, that I'd let him isolate me from friends who tried to warn me, that I'd been complicit in his schemes for years without fully acknowledging what was happening. When did you realize what he really was? There were moments of clarity along the way, but I suppressed them. The night you confronted us, seeing him threaten you like that, I couldn't deny it anymore. We talked for over 2 hours, painful, honest conversation that laid bare years of manipulation on Jackson's part and willful blindness on Amanda's. She didn't ask for forgiveness, which paradoxically made me more inclined to eventually offer it. She simply wanted me to understand how thoroughly Jackson had corrupted her judgment and separated her from her own moral compass. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "That depends on you," I told her. "I can't immediately trust you again. That will take time and consistent evidence that you've changed. But you are still my daughter, and I still love you." Tears filled her eyes again. "I don't deserve that." "Probably not," I agreed. "But love isn't always about deserving." By the time 6 months had passed, my life had transformed in ways I never could have anticipated when I first overheard Jackson's scheme. Jackson was facing multiple fraud charges and had fled the state, forfeiting his bail and becoming a fugitive. Amanda's divorce was proceeding in his absence, and she had found a job with a legitimate graphic design firm that allowed her to support herself and the children in a modest apartment. Our relationship was slowly mending. We attended family therapy together, painful sessions that nonetheless helped us establish new boundaries and expectations. I saw Zoe and Lucas regularly, though I was careful never to undermine Amanda's authority with them. My own life had blossomed in unexpected ways. The senior advocacy group had invited me to join their board, giving me a purpose and community I hadn't realized I was missing. Dorothy and I had become genuine friends, traveling together on a brief cruise to Alaska that Frank and I had always planned to take. Most importantly, I had reclaimed my sense of security and autonomy. My home was legally protected, my finances were in order, and I had a network of trusted advisors and friends to turn to when I needed help. The frightened, betrayed woman who had sat in her car sobbing after overhearing her family's scheme was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and surprisingly more at peace. One sunny morning, exactly 1 year after the day I overheard Jackson's plan, I sat on my back porch with a cup of coffee, watching the birds at my feeder. The garden Frank and I had planted together was in full bloom, a riot of colors and fragrances that still brought me joy after all these years. So much had changed in 12 months. Some changes were painful, like the permanent alteration in my relationship with Amanda. Though we were rebuilding trust, there would always be a scar where the wound of betrayal had healed. I was more careful now about what I shared with her, more vigilant about maintaining my independence. Other changes were unexpectedly positive. Through the senior advocacy group, I had made new friends who understood the challenges of aging in a society that often devalues its elders. I had discovered a talent for public speaking, sharing my story at community centers and retirement homes to warn others about financial exploitation. My relationship with Catherine and her family had deepened considerably. She visited weekly now, bringing her teenagers who seemed to genuinely enjoy spending time with their great-aunt. Catherine's husband, Mike, had helped me update my kitchen, refusing payment and saying simply, "This is what family does for each other." Family. The word had taken on new meaning for me. It no longer simply meant those connected by blood or marriage, but those who demonstrated love through respect, honesty, and support. Jackson remained a fugitive, though his face occasionally appeared on wanted lists. His business had collapsed completely, leaving many investors and contractors unpaid. Through the grapevine, I heard he had been spotted in Mexico, presumably living on whatever funds he had managed to hide offshore. Amanda had completed intensive therapy and was slowly rebuilding her life. She worked hard at her job, maintained a modest but comfortable home for the children, and never asked me for financial help. When she finally sold the large house she had shared with Jackson, she used the small amount of equity that remained after debts to establish college funds for Zoe and Lucas. "I want them to learn financial responsibility and independence," she told me, "not the values their father demonstrated." It was perhaps the clearest sign that she was genuinely changing. The legal protections Thomas had helped me establish gave me peace of mind I hadn't realized I was missing. My house and savings were secure in a properly structured trust. My new will reflected my current values and relationships. I had advance directives in place to ensure my wishes would be honored if I became unable to speak for myself. But beyond these practical matters, I had experienced a profound emotional transformation. The initial pain of betrayal had been almost unbearable, like a physical wound that took my breath away. For weeks, I had cycled through grief, rage, and despair, sometimes wondering if I would ever feel whole again. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, the acute pain had given way to something different. Not acceptance exactly, but perspective. The betrayal had been real and devastating, but it hadn't destroyed me. Instead, it had revealed strengths I didn't know I possessed. I had learned to distinguish between genuine care and manipulation disguised as concern. I had learned to value my own judgment instead of deferring to others simply because they were younger or more confident. I had learned that standing up for myself wasn't selfish, but necessary. Most surprisingly, I had learned that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or excusing harm. It meant freeing myself from the burden of bitterness. I hadn't fully forgiven Amanda yet, but I was working toward it for my sake as much as hers. The doorbell rang, interrupting my reflections. It was Dorothy arriving for our weekly walk. "You look pensive this morning," she observed as we set off toward the park. "Just thinking about everything that's happened this past year," I replied. "How different my life might have been if I hadn't forgotten my glasses that day." Dorothy nodded thoughtfully. "The little coincidences that change everything. If I hadn't noticed your lights were off that night and checked on you the next morning, who knows how long you might have struggled alone." "I'm grateful every day that you did," I told her sincerely. "You were the first link in the chain that led to me finding my voice again." We walked in comfortable silence for a while, enjoying the spring blossoms and greeting neighbors along the way. Many knew my story now, and often expressed admiration for how I had handled the situation. "Thomas called yesterday," I mentioned as we rounded the corner near the park. "He said the district attorney wants to interview me again about Jackson's case. Apparently they've got new evidence of other victims. Will you do it?" I nodded. If it helps prevent someone else from going through what I experienced, absolutely. Later that afternoon, Zoe and Lucas came over after school. At 11 and 9, they were at the age where they still enjoyed baking cookies with their grandmother, especially when I told stories about their mother as a child. Was Mom really afraid of thunderstorms until she was 12? Lucas asked incredulously, as we shaped cookie dough into balls. Terrified, I confirmed with a smile. She used to hide under her bed with her stuffed animals. Mom's not scared of anything now, Zoe declared loyally. I gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze. Your mother has become very brave. Sometimes people discover their courage when life gets difficult. Like you did, Grandma Zoe said. Mom told us you were really brave when that bad man tried to take your house. The simple, childish summary of the complex situation made me pause. Did she explain why that happened? Zoe nodded seriously. She said Dad tricked her into doing bad things, but she should have been strong enough to say no, and now she's learning to be strong like you. Tears pricked at my eyes. Amanda was telling them the truth in age, appropriate ways, taking responsibility without demonizing their father completely. It was a delicate balance I wasn't sure I could have managed in her position. After the children left, I sat down to write in the journal Thomas had suggested I keep throughout this process. It had become a valuable tool for processing my thoughts and tracking my emotional healing. 1 year later, I wrote, I understand that what happened wasn't just about money or property, it was about power control and the dangerous assumption that age diminishes a person's right to autonomy. Jackson saw me not as a human being with dignity and rights, but as an obstacle to his financial goals, a problem to be managed and manipulated. The hardest lesson was accepting that my own daughter could be complicit in such a scheme. I raised her to be kind and honest, to respect others, especially her elders. Where did those values go? How did she become someone who could nod and agree as her husband plotted to take everything from her mother? I may never fully understand how Amanda lost her way, but I've come to accept that understanding isn't necessary for healing. What matters is what we do now, how we rebuild what boundaries we establish. Today I am grateful for the strange twist of fate that led me to forget my glasses and return at exactly the right moment to overhear their plan. Without that knowledge, I might now be living in Amanda's basement watching strangers live in my home with no resources to change my situation. Instead, I am still in the home, Frank, and I shared surrounded by our memories and treasures. I am financially secure. I have new friends and stronger connections with extended family. I have purpose and community through my advocacy work. Most importantly, I have reclaimed my voice. I will never again be silenced by the fear of creating conflict or the desire to please others at my own expense. If there's wisdom to be gained from this painful chapter, perhaps it's this: trust should be given carefully and withdrawn when violated, regardless of family ties. Age doesn't diminish our right to respect and autonomy. And it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to say no to those who would take advantage, to rebuild a life that honors your own worth. As I closed my journal, the evening sun cast a golden glow across my living room. The house that had almost been stolen from me felt more truly mine than ever before. Not just the physical structure, but the peace and security it represented. I never expected to start over in my late 60s to have to fight for what was rightfully mine against my own family. But sometimes, life's harshest challenges reveal our greatest strengths. By standing up for myself, I discovered a resilience I never knew I possessed. And that knowledge, that quiet confidence, is something no one can ever take away from me. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who was trying to take advantage of you? Did you find strength you didn't know you had? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to find your voice and protect what's yours. Thank you for listening. And remember that sometimes the most powerful word in our vocabulary is simply no.